Things to be afraid of if you find them in your oil pan. I had mentioned a few videos back that we like to pull oil pans off here to see if there are any surprises lurking inside. And today we're going to talk about some of the things that we find inside those oil pans and when you should be concerned and when you should not be concerned. So we were talking about oil analysis, but there are a couple of things that preempt an oil analysis. We'll call them big red flags. The first one that I have to, and then there are some that are harmless, but we're going to go through the ones you should be concerned about first. The first one is almost always bearing material. So bearing material is usually flat. It comes in strips, like strips of bacon, but maybe over fried bacon. It's not magnetic, so you can't pick it up with a magnet. It's not shiny, and it's usually very flexible or malleable. That's the scientific term. It could be copper colored or aluminum colored or a mixture of both. But what you don't want to see are even small pieces of it. If you can see the piece of bearing material with your naked eye, it's time for an oil analysis. If you could pick it up with a pair of tweezers, you need to figure out what happened to this engine. And last but not least, if you could pick it up with 2 fingers, your engine's probably on death's door. Here are some other things you can find. Now, I remember I had an old 300 SD, 1979, and I took the lower oil pan off and I found chunks of a piston. So if you find a chunk of aluminum, it means you have a piston skirt that blew out. It doesn't necessarily mean that your engine's about to die, but something pretty bad happened to that engine, and I would probably be judicious before I took a car like that on a long trip. It usually means that the piston is fractured into multiple pieces and will usually go hand in hand with very high oil consumption. A third thing that we often find are shiny bits of gear teeth. Now, I remember we found this on a 190E16 valve, but you can also find this on, say, a 380 SL with a single row timing chain. And this typically means that the car suffered a timing chain failure at some point and maybe they didn't clean the pan off. Or out. They didn't pull the pan and clean it out. This does happen, especially on the V8 gas cars where people may never pull the lower oil pan off all the way and clean it. They'll just pull the heads, pull the timing cover, and call it a day. And that's almost always what happens in those cars. And if you have an SL with an aluminum oil pan, you have to pull the front subframe. Most shops are not going to do that. So you should be concerned because you need to know where it came from, because you don't want your gear teeth coming apart. Now we're going to go into some gray area. Plastic, hard plastic. What could hard plastic be? Well, if you're looking at an M116, M117, or even an M119 engine, it could be a piece of timing chain guide. And the critical thing here is to determine whether it's upper chain guide or lower chain guide and whether those guides have been replaced. If you guys know anything who have these cars, like a 450 SL or 380 SL or 560 SL or 560 SEL or 380 SE, if you guys know anything about these V8 Mercedes engines, you know that after 1974 they used plastic guides in the cylinder heads and they would break and then the pieces would eventually end up in the oil pan. Well, when that happens, the oil pans usually don't get cleaned and they never take the pieces of guide out. So you need to determine if you have new guides or not. Also, they could be from the bottom chain guides, and in that case you need a camera and you need to start investigating what's in that timing chain case, because you may have a broken guide down there too. You don't want to pull the timing cover off unless you have boundless energy and ample time. It's better to just get a cheap little camera adapter for your iPhone and snake it down in there and see if you have a guide that's failing. But if you do, the timing cover comes off. Now, there are some other things too that we find. Sometimes we'll find shiny pieces of chrome. That means you have a dying rocker arm or multiple rocker arms. Means you need to pull your rocker arms. Sometimes we found pieces of timing chain before, like a timing chain master link or a master link clip. If that's the case, you need to check your chain to make sure it's not about to go. And then sometimes we'll find like a grayish, muddy kind of residue, and that means that there was water in the oil Maybe there's no explanation for how it got there, but you should test your cooling system to make sure it's not leaking down. Anyway, I hope you guys had a great time listening to me ramble about stuff you shouldn't find in your oil pan and what you might need to investigate. If you enjoyed this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you don't drive a Mercedes and you have a car that sucks, you can buy a part maybe from Good Used Gaskets, which is one of our sponsors, that might fix your car but probably won't. So anyway, thank you for watching, and thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. We really appreciate you guys, especially. We're here anytime you guys need us. Thank you so much.